It's an agenda that serves nobody except the richest and the most extreme amongst us. And it's an agenda that does nothing for our neighbors in need. Is it weird? Absolutely. Absolutely. But it's also wrong. And it's dangerous.
Your reaction to that?
Well, when Donald Trump was president, Jake, you had people buying homes at record rates. You had young Americans who were able to afford to raise a family. You had people who could afford the basic trappings of middle-class life in this country. And so when Tim Walz says that Donald Trump's agenda doesn't work for middle-class Americans, he already was president for 4 years, and his agenda worked very well for middle-class Americans. Again, I just wish, I would love for Tim Walz or Kamala Harris or anybody else to say that during the 3.5 years that Kamala Harris was vice president, here is the thing that she did to make groceries more affordable. Here is the thing that she did to make it possible to raise a family in this country. Or here's the thing that she did to secure rather than open up the border. Because they can't talk about Kamala Harris's record, they're creating a phantom of Donald Trump's leadership. The Donald Trump that I know and that the American people know, I think, produced really good results for the American people. It's a record to be proud of, and a record I'd like to get back to, frankly, because it was good for the American people.
Both you and President Trump have suggested that there's something wrong or illegitimate about the way that Kamala Harris replaced Joe Biden on the Democratic ticket. Now that the Democratic convention is here, do you accept Kamala Harris, Vice President Harris, as the legal and legitimate presidential nominee of the Democratic Party?
Well, first of all, Jake, she's certainly the legitimate nominee of the Democratic Party. We're going to debate her, and we're going to try to beat her in November. But I do think it's a little bizarre how the Democrats went about this. We have to remember that for 3.5 years, Kamala Harris and a lot of Democrats said that Joe Biden was totally fit for the job. That was revealed to be a lie. And then when it became obvious that Joe Biden was political dead weight, they replaced him without casting a single Democrat primary vote. That doesn't make it illegal, but it certainly makes it a little bizarre. And if I was a Joe Biden voter, I'd be pretty frustrated at the way that this unfolded.
That's right. When Donald Trump was president, Americans across the board, especially in the middle class, felt the positive impact of his policy. People were buying homes at record rates. Young family could afford to live comfortably, and the basic trapping of the American dream were within reach. So when Tim Walz or Kamala Harris tries to dismiss Trump's agenda as harmful to the middle class, it's clear they're ignoring the reality of the success millions of Americans experienced. Trump's record speaks for itself. During his presidency, we saw real economic growth, tax cuts that benefited working families, and policies that prioritize American workers. Compare that to the last 3 years under Harris and Biden, it's not a match. Where's the progress? What has Harris done to make grocery more affordable, to ease the burden on families, or to secure our borders? The answer is simple: nothing. They can't point to her record because it's non-existent or outright harmful. Instead, they're creating a phantom image of Trump that distracts from their own failures. But the truth is, the American people know the result Trump delivered, and it's a record to be proud of. One that should fight for, to bring back or return to, pretty much. We should fight for it. Now, when it comes to Kamala Harris' sudden rise as a Democratic nominee, let's call it what it is: a bizarre backroom maneuver. For years, Democrats insisted that Joe Biden was fully fit for the job, but as soon as he became political dead weight, they discarded him without a single primary vote being cast for Kamala Harris. And sure, it's legal, but it's also a slap in the face to the voters who put their trust in Biden. If I were pretty much one of those voters, I would be mad, I would be pissed, frustrated. The bottom line is, yes, we accept Harris as the legitimate nominee right now. The convention is going on, and we're ready to have her pretty much debate her case and tell to the American people what her policy is on the issues that matter most to the people. But let's not ignore the fact that the way this all unfolded is deeply concerning. The Democrats wants to pretend this is business as usual, but the American people see through it. And come November, we have to hammer and remind people what real leadership looks like. Leadership that delivered for the middle class, secure the borders, and put the American people first.
Before you go, quickly, if you could, CNN's reporting that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is expected to suspend his presidential campaign on Friday. It's been reported that he's considering endorsing Donald Trump, especially if he gets made Secretary of Health and Human Services or such. Have the two men been talking? Do you expect an endorsement? How much might it help?
So I don't talk to Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Jake. I certainly listen to what he says, and I do think that he is a guy who recognizes that the Kennedy Democrats of old have been replaced by the Kamala Harris Democrats who support high inflation and open borders. So I'm not surprised that he feels left behind by the Democratic Party. I think a lot of Democrats, a lot of people like my grandparents feel left behind by the Democratic Party. I would certainly welcome his endorsement of Donald Trump. I've seen the same reports you mentioned. I don't know if it's actually going to happen, but I certainly hope it does, because I do think it would be helpful, because it drives home this idea that the Democratic Party of John F. Kennedy, it's just not the Democratic Party of 2024. Let's get back to common sense. And unfortunately, the only American leader running on common sense right now at a national level is Donald Trump.
Senator JD Vance of Ohio, thanks so much. Safe travels, sir.
Good night, Jake. Thanks.
There is a growing number of Democrats who, like Kennedy, feel alienated by the direction of their party. People like, RFK Jr., pretty much. And such an endorsement of RFK Jr. to Trump will underscore a critical point. The Democratic Party or John F. Kennedy no longer exists. What we have now is a party that's lost its way, a party that left common sense behind. And right now, the only leader running on common sense at the national level is Donald Trump. His policies are about putting American first, restoring economic stability, and protecting the borders. Issues that resonate across the political spectrum. So if RFK Jr. does endorse Trump, it will be a powerful statement that transcends party lines, bringing more Americans into the fold who are ready to get back to common sense leadership.
Dana Bash, Abby Phillip, I will say, whatever one thinks about Senator Vance, he is much more on message and has much more discipline than that other guy on that ticket.
Which is, well, I'm not saying that that is the reason that Donald Trump chose him, but he did choose JD Vance. A big reason was how he does on television and making the case for Donald Trump, for Trumpism, which he has been doing since Vance changed his mind about Donald Trump and supported him beginning in his own race for Senate in 2022. That last answer, Jake, about RFK Jr. welcoming him and trying to suggest that the party left the Kennedys, I'm guessing that that's going to be a message that we're going to hear more and more as they try to get that small sliver, but it will probably be an important sliver in key states of the RFK vote. Even though it's one Kennedy and most of the Kennedys are supporting the Democratic ticket.
Sure, the grandson of John F. Kennedy spoke the other night.
Exactly. But his name is Kennedy. And so that is part of the reason why he had support, even though a lot of the people who are supporting him, maybe they know some of his policies, but not all of his policies. They certainly know his name.
Yeah, I mean, think that Kennedy, and the reason that JD Vance is welcoming the Kennedy voters in, is because they're Trump voters. They're people who
Right.
otherwise would be voting for Trump. The reason for the Kennedy candidacy from the beginning initially was to give voters a choice between two unpopular options, Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Now that Joe Biden's out of the race, the air has come out of that side of the balloon, leaving really the Trump share. And that's what the Trump campaign needs to have back in this race that's suddenly become so tight between these two candidates. There's no question that they're concerned that Kennedy staying in the race is going to be the margin in some of these places where this election is going to be decided, and it's not. I think that's a little disingenuous to suggest that these are necessarily Kennedy Democrats. I think that these are people who are broadly unaffiliated, broadly disenchanted. Maybe if there were no Kennedy in the race, they would be leaning toward Donald Trump, and those are the people that Trump needs back.
Well, there are two things going on here with his answer. One is obviously elections are a game of addition, and in some of these states the margin's going to be so slim, as you alluded to. It helps. I think I saw a poll that said of the current Kennedy voters, 50% would go to Trump, about 25% to Harris, and then 25% don't know where they'd go or go somewhere else. But the other point, obviously, is, John F. Kennedy's Democratic Party was much more conservative, but also Richard Nixon, who ran against Kennedy in 1960, was that Republican Party was much more liberal than today's Republican Party. And neither party is recognizable.
RFK Jr.'s father, Robert F. Kennedy, was probably much more in line with the Democratic Party today. I think that's a complete myth that suddenly RFK Jr., just because he has the name, represents he is running a campaign that is largely about giving people another option that is not the two major parties, and he's running on all kinds of other random things, including a lot of conspiracies.
Speaking of conspiracies, I do think that your question to JD Vance about Kamala Harris and Tim Walz being the legitimate Democratic nominees is going to be something that we're going to look back on, because we are listening to Donald Trump more and more talking about a coup and talking about, what went on that got Kamala Harris to the top of the ticket. And we saw what happened in 2020 when he started to sprinkle breadcrumbs along the path to claiming a stolen election.
Just ahead, how Minnesota delegates.
The analysis here highlights two critical dynamics at play. First, the embrace of RFK Jr. By figures like JD Vance reflect a broader strategy within the Trump campaign, appealing to disenchanted voters who might be leaning toward Kennedy out of frustration with both major parties. These voters, as Abby Phillip noted, may not necessarily be traditional Democrats or Republican, but rather individual disillusioned by the political status quo. By welcoming them into the fold, Trump is attempting to reclaim a portion of his 2016 base, particularly in key swing states where even a small shift in support could be decisive. Second, the conversation about RFK Jr.'s candidacy underscored a significant ideological shift within both major parties over the decades. While some see RFK Jr. as a throwback to an older, more conservative version of the Democratic Party, his platform diverges sharply from both parties' current trajectory and his own family's political legacy. This highlights the fluid nature of political alliances and the complexities of voter motivations in today's polarized landscape. The real challenge for Trump will be to leverage this potential RFK Jr.'s endorsement, should it materialize, to broaden its appeal without alienating its core supporters. As the campaign progresses, watch for how Trump navigates this tightrope, particularly in contrast to more traditional Democratic coalition that Harris and Walz are trying to build. The stakes are high, and every voter's count. What's shaping up to be a razor-thin contest coming this November? We have to brace ourselves, get ready to make our voices heard. Thanks for tuning in. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let's get the conversation going. If you enjoyed this discussion, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe for more content, and ring the bell so you never miss an update. Your supports help us keep this critical conversation alive. Thank you.